just checking in. You own this vehicle?
It's hers. We're fine, officer.
Yes, just taking a break.
For 18 years, ICE Enforcement Officer Craig Mercer had operated with the quiet confidence of a man who had never been made to answer for anything. His 2 prior misconduct complaints, one from a Guatemalan family he had detained without cause in a grocery store parking lot, another from a black homeowner he had accused of casing his own neighborhood, were buried so deep in the agency's internal review system that even the investigators who filed them had stopped asking about the outcomes. He had made a habit of patrolling the affluent residential corridors of Crestwood Township and its surrounding parklands, stopping anyone whose face didn't match his idea of who belonged there, and suggesting, with the practiced authority of someone who had never been corrected, that they would be more comfortable somewhere else. On January 22, 2025, during what he logged as a routine welfare check, he spotted Darius and Simone Carter sitting together on the hood of their parked car in Lakewood Park, and immediately made a decision that had nothing to do with welfare and everything to do with who he believed should be allowed to exist in that space. "I don't know what you two are really doing here, but this relaxed little routine isn't convincing anyone," Mercer announced as he approached with his 2 partners flanking either side of the vehicle, his hand resting on his belt as he accused them of casing the surrounding homes or conducting some kind of illicit transaction under the cover of an ordinary afternoon, threatening to detain them both and contact additional units if they didn't vacate the park immediately. What Mercer couldn't see beneath their casual weekend clothes were 2 Homeland Security Investigations badges, 2 service weapons, and 2 federal agents who now had him completely and irrevocably on the record for civil rights violations that would end his career before the sun went down. Before we go any further, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, and make sure you hit the like button so you never miss stories like this one. Darius Carter, 36, had spent 9 years with Homeland Security Investigations' Organized Crime and Trafficking Division, running operations that had dismantled smuggling networks stretching from the Gulf Coast to the Great Lakes. Sitting beside him on that car hood was his wife of 6 years, Simone Carter, 34, like a decorated agent in HSY's Civil Rights Enforcement Division, who had built her entire career prosecuting exactly the kind of abuse of power they were about to experience from the other side. They had driven 40 minutes from their apartment to spend a rare Wednesday afternoon at Lakewood Park, a place Simone had walked with her father as a little girl when they visited her grandparents nearby. Darius had just gotten her laughing with a story about their dog when Simone's smile faded, her eyes catching something over his shoulder. "We've got company," she said quietly, her voice dropping into a register Darius recognized immediately. It wasn't fear. It was the particular alertness of a federal agent clocking a developing situation. Officer Craig Mercer was 52, a man whose career had plateaued at field agent after failing the supervisory examination twice. His personnel file told a story his superiors had chosen not to read carefully. A 2019 complaint from a black family he had detained in their own driveway while demanding to see proof they lived there. A 2021 incident in which he and his unit surrounded a Latino construction crew eating lunch in a park 2 miles from this one, holding them for 40 minutes based on nothing but the color of their skin and the neighborhood they had chosen to stop in. A 2023 grievance from an Indian American couple he had demanded produce documentation while they waited outside a restaurant for a table. Each time, the agency issued a written caution, scheduled Mercer for a mandatory awareness session, and returned him to the field. Mercer had learned what that cycle meant. It meant he could keep going. "Afternoon," Mercer said, positioning himself directly in front of them with his 2 partners, Officers Ruiz and Holt, taking up positions on either side of the vehicle, a containment posture so practiced it happened without a word between them. "Going to need to see identification from both of you. Immigration documents if you have them." Darius spoke first, his voice entirely level. "Is there a problem, officer?" "That's what I'm working out," Mercer replied. "We've received reports of suspicious activity in this area, vehicles being cased, possible transactions going down, and the 2 of you have been sitting out here long enough that people have noticed." Simone felt Darius's hand brush her knee. Their signal, unestablished years ago for moments exactly like this one. And she reached toward her phone resting on the car hood beside her, angling it slightly against her jacket so the microphone faced forward, Then tap the screen twice to activate the voice recorder. The screen went dark, but the small red indicator confirmed it was capturing everything. Darius adjusted his position slightly to make sure his body didn't obstruct the angle. "We're spending the afternoon in a public park," Simone said, her tone measured and even. "We have every right to be here." Mercer's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you two think you're pulling, but this innocent couple act doesn't hold up. I think you're running surveillance on those properties down the road. Or maybe you're out here waiting on something and figured a park was good cover." He stepped forward, his hand moving to rest on his handcuffs. "Here's how this is going to go. You're going to produce identification right now, and then you're going to leave this area. If you're still here in 5 minutes, I'm detaining both of you and calling this in as a possible immigration violation. Are we clear?" Darius felt his pulse climb. Not from fear, because fear wasn't what this was. In 9 years with the Bureau, he had encountered this exact scenario dozens of times in case files and civil rights investigations. He had read the transcripts. He had reviewed the body camera footage. He had interviewed the victims. He had simply never been one of them before. Beside him, Simone sat perfectly still, the phone recording every syllable. Both of them were mentally logging every detail for the report they would file the moment this encounter ended. What Officer Craig Mercer didn't know, standing there with the satisfied posture of a man who believed authority was something he wore on his chest rather than earned through conduct, was that he had just threatened to detain 2 of HSY's most experienced agents, and every word of it was being captured on audio, building a federal case that would strip him of his career before the day was out. The confrontation had only just begun, and it was about to get considerably worse. Darius Carter had negotiated with armed traffickers, coordinated takedowns in 3 states simultaneously, and once talked a panicked informant out of blowing a 2-year operation in the span of a 90-second phone call. None of that had prepared him for the particular quality of anger that came from sitting on the hood of his own car, in a park his wife had loved since childhood, watching a federal officer rest his hand on his handcuffs and decide without a single fact to support the decision that they were criminals. Simone felt it too. Her division had spent years building cases against officers who weaponized enforcement authority against the people it was supposed to protect. She had sat across from families in interview rooms and documented what that kind of encounter costs people, not just legally, but in ways that don't show up in case files. She had always known, in the abstract way that training provides, that the day might come when she would be on this side of that table. She hadn't fully understood what that meant until right now. "Officer," Darius said, keeping his voice completely neutral, "we're not looking to make this difficult for anyone. We're happy to cooperate, but I'd like you to tell me specifically what suspicious activity you're referring to. What's the report number? What reports are you working from?" "I don't owe you an explanation," Mercer snapped, his tone sharpening. "When a federal officer asks for identification, you provide it. That's how this works. Unless there's a reason you'd rather not." Simone shifted slightly on the car hood, confirming the phone was still capturing clean audio. There were a few people visible at the far edge of the park. A man walking a retriever, a woman pushing a stroller. But none of them close enough to see what was unfolding. That distance made the situation more volatile, not less. "Like, we don't have anything to hide," Simone said, her tone professional and precise. "But you have accused us of criminal activity without a single piece of evidence. You have threatened to detain us for sitting in a public park. You have demanded immigration documentation without cause. We are entitled to know what we are being accused of." Mercer took a step forward, positioning himself above them in the way he had positioned himself above hundreds of people over the course of his career, using his physical presence to make the space feel smaller, the options feel narrower, the authority feel absolute. His shadow crossed their faces as the pale January light sat low behind him. "You want to know what you're being accused of?" he said, his voice going flat with contempt. "I have been working this area for close to 2 decades. I know who belongs in these neighborhoods and who doesn't, and the 2 of you do not belong here. This park, these streets, this community. It isn't for people like you. So either you're here scoping out properties, or you're here waiting on something, or you're running some kind of angle using this whole couple's routine as cover." Simone felt Darius's hand find her wrist. One light, deliberate press. She understood it perfectly. Let him keep talking. The more he said, the tighter the case became. Officer Mercer, Darius said, reading the name from the badge and saying it clearly and deliberately for the recording. What you are doing right now is racial profiling. You have no evidence of any crime. You have no reasonable articulable suspicion. You are in violation of our Fourth Amendment rights. The sound of his own name spoken in that particular tone made Mercer's face darken. He had never found it anything other than insubordination when someone cited legal language back at him, as though knowing the law was some kind of challenge to the order he was trying to maintain. His hand moved from his handcuffs to his radio. "Think you're pretty sharp, don't you?" Mercer said, his voice now fully hostile. "I've been doing this for 18 years. I know what criminal behavior looks like, and everything about this situation is wrong." He brought the radio to his mouth. "This is Unit 7. I need additional units at Lakewood Park, south entrance, near the lot. 2 subjects refusing to comply with a lawful order. Possible immigration violation, possible 1060, so narcotics involvement not ruled out." Simone and Darius exchanged the briefest glance. By adding narcotics to that transmission, Mercer wasn't just harassing them anymore. He was manufacturing an official record, a false one, built on nothing, designed to give any responding officer a reason to treat this as something it was not. This had crossed from misconduct into something with a different name entirely. "We have cooperated with everything you have asked," Simone said steadily. "From the moment you approached this vehicle. You initiated this contact without cause. We have committed no crime. We have not behaved suspiciously by any legal definition. We have been respectful throughout." "Respectful?" Mercer said, a short, bitter sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "You've been challenging me since the second I got here. That's not respect. In my experience, people who push back this hard on a routine contact are pushing back because they've got something they don't want found." He planted his feet. "Here's what's going to happen. Both of you are going to step away from the vehicle. Hands where my partners can see them, and you're going to stand there until my backup arrives." Darius stood slowly, every movement deliberate and open, no gesture that could be misread. He was 6'1" and built in a way that he had learned a long time ago made certain people nervous, so he was always careful. Always slow, always visible, always measured in a way that no one should have to be in a public park on a Wednesday afternoon. Simone stood a moment after him, her hand still close to her phone. "We're standing," Darius said calmly. "We are not under arrest. Are we being detained?" "You're not free to go," Mercer said, which was a detention, legally, whether he used the word or not. "And if you attempt to leave, I will place both of you under arrest for obstruction." From somewhere across the park, the sound of vehicles entering the lot carried through the cold air. Mercer's backup had arrived. Mercer straightened slightly, the posture of a man who believed he had already won. He had run this exact situation dozens of times, and it always resolved the same way. You got backup, you applied pressure, and eventually people remembered that resistance had a cost. He had 18 years of experience telling him this was over. He had no idea it had barely started. 2 additional ICE vehicles rolled into the Lakewood Park lot with lights cycling but no sirens. And from the first one stepped Agent Diana Okafor, a 12-year HSI veteran who had requested a transfer out of Mercer's district twice in the past 3 years and been denied both times. She was 41 years old, and she had worked enough joint operations with Craig Mercer to have developed a detailed private understanding of the gap between what he reported and what actually happened. As she walked across the winter grass toward the south lot where Mercer stood with 2 civilians and his partners, she assessed the scene in the way that long experience makes instinctive. A couple beside a parked car, hands visible, posture relaxed despite obvious tension, no indicators of aggression, no behavior that warranted 3 federal agents and a radio call. Her internal alarm, the one built by a decade of watching things go sideways, was already sounding. "What are we working with, Mercer?" she asked as she reached them, her hand resting at her side and nowhere near her weapon. She made eye contact with Darius and Simone as she approached, a brief, direct acknowledgement that registered them as people rather than as objects of enforcement. "These two have been sitting here all afternoon acting suspicious," Mercer said, his voice carrying the particular satisfaction of a man whose reinforcements have arrived. "Refusing to produce identification, challenging my authority, and I believe there may be a connection to recent complaints in this area, possible narcotics involvement." Okafor's eyes moved over Darius and Simone again. Their clothing was clean and casual. Their demeanor was composed in a way that looked less like innocence performing itself and more like discipline. Nothing about them read as anything Mercer's radio call had described. "Have they committed a crime?" Okafor asked him directly, her tone professionally flat. "They're in violation of park ordinance. Loitering," Mercer said. The weakness of it was visible even as he said it. "In a public park," Okafor said, "in the middle of the afternoon." The sentence didn't need anything after it. Darius decided it was time. He had been patient. He had been measured. He had let Mercer pour 18 years of unchecked behavior into an audio recording that was now detailed enough to form the foundation of a federal civil rights complaint, and he had done it without raising his voice once. Now Simone caught his eye and gave him the smallest possible nod. She had been counting the violations the same way he had. 18 minutes of illegal detention. Racial profiling documented in Mercer's own words. Fabricated radio transmissions. Baseless accusations of narcotics involvement. A pattern of conduct that, combined with his personnel file, would constitute exactly what it was. It was time to end it. "Agent Okafor," Darius said, his voice shifting. Not louder, not harder, but carrying a different weight than everything that had come before it. "My name is Darius Carter. This is my wife, Simone Carter. Before anything else happens here, there is something you and your colleagues need to know." Mercer stepped forward immediately. "I told you to keep your hands where I can see them and stay quiet. Nobody gave you permission to—" Darius looked straight at Okafor and ignored him completely. Mercer was no longer the relevant variable in this situation. Darius reached into the interior pocket of his jacket, slowly, every movement deliberate and visible. "I'm going to show you my credentials." "Don't you dare reach into—" Mercer started, his hand moving toward his belt. "Mercer, stand down." Okafor's voice was a blade. Her instincts had been telling her something was wrong with this scene since she stepped out of her vehicle, and they were telling her now, very clearly, to stop moving and pay attention. Darius withdrew a black leather case and opened it. On one side, a gold federal badge. On the other, an identification card bearing an official seal that Agent Okafor recognized before she had finished reading the first line. Her eyes went wide. "I am Special Agent Darius Carter, Homeland Security Investigations Organized Crime and Trafficking Division," Darius said, his voice carrying the full and unambiguous weight of federal authority. "This is Special Agent Simone Carter, HSI Civil Rights Enforcement Division. And for the past 18 minutes, Officer Mercer, you have been violating our constitutional rights while we documented every single word." The color didn't drain from Mercer's face gradually. It left all at once. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. Simone reached down and picked up her phone from where it had been recording the entire encounter. She held the screen up so all three officers could see it clearly. Everything said and done during this contact has been captured on audio. Every accusation, every threat, every statement about where people like us belong. We have documentation of you claiming we were casing properties without a single fact to support that claim. We have you fabricating narcotics involvement in an official radio transmission. We have you conducting an illegal detention in violation of our Fourth Amendment rights. And we have 18 minutes of your own words, in your own voice, describing exactly the basis on which you made every decision you made today. Agent Okafor took 3 steps back from Mercer. A physical separation that spoke before she did. A visible refusal to stand in the same frame with what she was watching unfold. Her expression was not shock. It was the look of a person who had suspected something for a long time and was now watching it confirm itself in the worst possible way. There's been... Mercer's voice was unsteady for the first time since he had stepped out of his vehicle. There's been a misunderstanding here. I was conducting a routine. What reports? Darius cut in, his voice precise and cold. Give me the incident numbers. Give me the case reference. Give me one piece of documented evidence that gave you legal basis for this contact. He paused. Let the silence expand. You can't, because there are no reports. There was no incident. You profiled us from the moment you saw us and made every decision that followed based entirely on the color of our skin. Mercer's hands were shaking. 18 years of complaints that went nowhere. 18 years of a system absorbing what he did and handing him back his badge. He had done this exact thing more times than he could count. And it had never ended any way except the way he decided it would end. He had chosen the wrong people on the wrong day, and he was only now understanding the full cost of that. Simone produced her own credentials and held them toward Agent Okafor, who studied them for a moment and then nodded slowly, the nod of someone whose understanding of the last 18 minutes has just been completely reorganized. Agent Okafor, Simone said, I'm going to need your name, badge number, and your supervisor's contact information. You will be listed as a witness to this encounter, though your arrival time means you were not present for the majority of the civil rights violations on record. Special Agent Diana Okafor, she said immediately, her voice steady despite everything. Badge 4491. My direct supervisor is Deputy Director Castillo at the regional office. She's available by phone. Good, Simone said. You are going to contact Deputy Director Castillo right now and inform her that 2 HSI special agents are filing formal complaints against officers of this unit for civil rights violations, racial profiling, illegal detention, false radio transmissions, and the fabrication of official documentation. Mercer found what was left of his voice. The desperation in it was the only thing left of the authority he'd walked into this park wearing. Listen, there's a way through this. I made an error in judgment. If I had known who you were, that's the entire problem, Darius said. The coldness in his voice was not anger. It was clarity. You didn't do this because you didn't know we were federal agents. You did this because we're black. And the fact that you believe our credentials should have protected us, that you think what you did here would be acceptable for any citizen who happened not to carry a badge, that tells me exactly what you think of the people you are supposed to serve. The words hit Mercer in a way that his face couldn't conceal. He stood there in his uniform, in the park, where 40 minutes ago he had felt the complete and unchallenged power of his own authority, and understood for the first time in 18 years that it was finished. Deputy Director Castillo arrived at Lakewood Park 20 minutes after Okafor's call, and the instant she reviewed Darius and Simone's credentials and confirmed the audio recording on Simone's phone, feeling her expression did something that had nothing to do with surprise and everything to do with the specific exhaustion of someone watching a problem they inherited become a catastrophe they now had to manage. HSI Internal Affairs was on site within the hour. The park, quiet and gray and empty of any real drama when Darius and Simone had first arrived, now held 3 ICE vehicles, 2 deputy directors, a pair of federal investigators, and Officer Craig Mercer sitting in the back of his own unit waiting for the conversation no one was in a hurry to have with him. Director Castillo listened to the full 18-minute recording on Simone's phone without interruption. When it ended, she sat with it for a moment. Then she looked at Mercer. You are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full internal investigation. Badge and credentials. Dino? Mercer's hands shook as he surrendered them, the badge and the ID and the service weapon, handing over in a single exchange the 18 years he had spent accumulating the authority he had just burned to the ground. Okafor stood to the side as a formal witness, recording everything in her incident log. Darius and Simone filed their complaints simultaneously with HSI Internal Affairs and the agency's Civil Rights Division, submitting the audio recording and their detailed written accounts of the encounter. When investigators pulled the body camera footage from all three officers, it confirmed everything. Not just their account, but the specific sequence of decisions Mercer had made, visible from his own perspective, frame by frame. The body cam showed him spotting the vehicle and deciding before he had parked, before he had stepped out, before he had said a single word, what he believed the two people beside it had done. Within 48 hours, the Department of Homeland Security opened a formal civil rights investigation. Within 72, it had expanded to include a review of Mercer's full enforcement record spanning his entire career at the agency. Officers Ruiz and Holt were placed on administrative leave. 3 weeks later, following an investigation that confirmed what his complaint history had already suggested and the agency had repeatedly chosen to overlook, Craig Mercer was terminated from federal service. The body camera evidence was particularly decisive because it removed any possibility of reframing. His own equipment had captured his own conduct in its own time, from his own chest, in his own words. And there was nothing to contest. For Darius and Simone Carter, the outcome was real, and it was right, and it was not enough. They had the professional standing, the legal expertise, and the institutional authority to hold Mercer accountable in ways that most of the people he had spent 18 years targeting never could. But as they drove home that evening through a city going dark around them, the heater running and the coffee long cold in the thermos between them, they couldn't stop thinking about everyone else. Every family Mercer had surrounded in a parking lot. Every homeowner he had cornered in their own driveway. Every person who had stood in front of that wall of manufactured authority with nothing but the truth on their side and no credentials to produce that would make the system pause long enough to listen. Those people didn't get an investigation. They didn't get a terminated officer and a formal civil rights review. They got a warning they didn't deserve and a lesson they shouldn't have had to learn about who the law considered worth protecting. Simone said it first, quietly, somewhere on the highway between the park and home. She didn't say it about the investigation or the recording or the case file. She said it about all of them. Officer Craig Mercer's career was finished. The fight against the system that had protected him, absorbed his complaints, returned his badge, and sent him back out to do it again. That fight was nowhere near over. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And make sure you subscribe so you never miss the stories that hold power accountable. We'll see you in the next one.